You keep giving, and you keep ending up with less. That is not kindness. That is a wound you have not looked at yet. Think about the last time you helped someone. It really helped them. You gave your time. You gave your energy. Maybe you gave your money. Maybe you gave your reputation. You stayed late. You showed up. You sacrificed something real. And what came back? Ask yourself that honestly. What actually came back to you in return? For most people watching this right now, the answer is uncomfortable. The answer is not much. Maybe nothing. Maybe something worse than nothing. Maybe you got dependency. Maybe you got resentment. Maybe you got silence so loud it told you everything you needed to know about where you actually stood with that person. And here is what makes it worse. You did it again anyway, because somewhere inside you, you believe that giving more will eventually produce the result you are looking for, that if you just give enough, the scales will balance, that loyalty will be rewarded, that effort will be noticed, that generosity will generate generosity in return. Niccolò Machiavelli spent his entire life studying human behavior at the absolute summit of power. He studied princes and popes and generals and merchants. He watched how people actually behave when real resources are on the line. Not how they say they will behave, not how they behave when everything is comfortable, how they behave when it costs something. His conclusion was not born from bitterness. It was born from observation. It was clinical, surgical. It was the product of a man who removed every romantic illusion from his thinking and looked at human nature with clear, unblinking eyes. What he found was this. Most people never learn to distinguish between those who are worth helping and those who simply take. And that failure of discernment, that inability to look clearly at who is sitting across from you before you open your hand, is one of the most costly strategic errors a person can make in their entire life. Greene documented the same pattern 5 centuries later in the 48 Laws of Power. Different era, same human nature. The lesson has not changed, and yet here you are, still giving to people who take, still exhausted, still wondering why your generosity has not produced the life you imagined it would. Here is the thesis of this entire video. Your desire to help is not the problem. The desire to help is not a weakness. It is actually a form of strength when it is deployed correctly. But indiscriminate helping without discernment, helping without examining who you are helping and why, is not a virtue. It is a strategic error. It is the equivalent of a surgeon operating on a patient without first diagnosing what is wrong. The intention is good. The outcome is damage. Today, you are going to correct that error. In this video, you're going to learn 6 specific types of people that power philosophy, self-mastery tradition, and behavioral psychology all converge to identify as requiring extreme clarity before you offer your help. Not because these people are enemies, not because they are bad, but because helping them without self-awareness costs you far more than it benefits anyone. And more importantly, you are going to walk away from this video with concrete, actionable tactics for each type, things you can apply starting today. Here are the 6. 1. The chronic victim. 2. The entitled receiver. 3. The gratitude void. 4. The covert contractor. 5. The dependency builder. And 6. The resentful beneficiary. Stay until the end because the 6th type is the one you will least expect. It is the one you will least expect. It is the one who lives closest to you. If that makes you uncomfortable right now, good. Stay anyway. That discomfort is information. Number 1. The chronic victim. You know this person. You have always known this person. Their life is a continuous series of disasters that somehow always require your involvement. Every time you think the situation has stabilized, something new collapses. A new crisis arrives, a new emergency. A new reason they need you to step in, step up, and give something of yourself so they can get through another week. Now here is the psychological architecture of what is actually happening. The chronic victim is not simply someone who has bad luck. Chronic victimhood is a psychological posture. It is a way of relating to the world and to other people that has, over time, become the primary method this person uses to generate connection, resource, and attention. Think about what that means clinically for a moment. The victim posture works. It produces results. When someone presents themselves as perpetually overwhelmed, perpetually at the mercy of circumstances, perpetually one crisis away from collapse, other people respond. People like you respond. You mobilize, you give, you help, and in doing so you inadvertently reinforce the very pattern you are trying to rescue them from. This is what behavioral psychology calls a reinforcement loop. Every time you rescue the chronic victim, you are teaching them on a deep unconscious level that the victim posture is effective, that it produces care, resources, and connection. You are not helping them out of the pattern. You are helping them deeper into it. The lion does not share its kill with the hyena out of compassion. It understands that feeding scavengers does not eliminate scavenging, it multiplies it. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Most people quote that line without understanding what it actually means in the context of self-mastery. What Machiavelli is identifying is the danger of being valued primarily as a resource rather than as a person. When you are loved primarily for what you give, you are not loved, you are maintained. You are kept functional so the giving continues. Ask yourself this question right now. When was the last time this person in your life showed up for you before you showed up for them? Count to 3. Let the answer come. Here is your tactical adjustment. Before you give your next unit of time or energy to someone you identify as a chronic victim, pause and apply what self-mastery philosophy calls the reciprocity audit. It is simple. Over the last 90 days, has this person contributed to your well-being in any concrete, observable way? Not in intention, not in statements of future reciprocity. In actual behavior. If the answer is no, your job is not to withhold compassion. Your job is to redirect your investment toward people and pursuits that actually grow when you water them. Give your help in ways that require the other person to take an active role. Stop solving. Start equipping. There is a difference, and it matters. The next type is more sophisticated. It will require you to look more carefully, because this one does not always announce itself with drama. Number 2, the entitled receiver. The entitled receiver is different from the chronic victim in one critical way. The chronic victim at least performs gratitude. They say thank you. They tell you how much it means to them. They make you feel needed. The entitled receiver skips that part entirely. For them, your help is not a gift, it is an obligation. It is simply what you owe them because of who they are, because of your relationship to them, or because of some unspoken social contract they have decided exists. This is a concept called a covert contract. A covert contract is a one-sided agreement that exists entirely in one person's mind. The entitled receiver has decided without your knowledge or consent that your resources are partly theirs, that your time is available on demand, that your energy is a shared asset. And when you do not deliver on this contract they created without you, they do not feel disappointment, they feel wronged, they feel you have failed them. The cognitive dissonance here is remarkable. They experience genuine injury when you do not give, and they experience zero obligation to reciprocate. Think about a fox who has decided the den belongs to it. The fox did not build the den. The fox simply arrived, found it warm, and decided possession was a right. That is the psychology of entitlement in its most stripped-down form. It is not malice. It is a deeply calcified belief that the world owes a debt that is perpetually unpaid. Robert Greene, drawing on centuries of court dynamics and political behavior, identified this archetype as one of the most energy-draining forces a person can allow into their inner circle, not because entitled people are rare, but because they are almost invisible until you have already given significantly. Here is your tactical adjustment. Information asymmetry is your instrument of self-protection here. Stop broadcasting your availability. Stop volunteering your resources before they are requested. Let the entitled receiver make an explicit ask. When the ask is explicit, you have the opportunity to respond with clarity and choice, rather than being pulled by the gravity of assumed obligation. Make your contributions visible to yourself, not to them. Keep a private record of what you give and what returns, not to build resentment, to build accuracy. You cannot make a clear-eyed decision without clear-eyed data. And here is a pattern, interrupt worth practicing. The next time someone who fits this pattern makes a demand of your time or energy, pause before responding. Not passive-aggressively, literally pause, 3 seconds of neutral silence. Then respond with a question instead of a yes or a no. Ask, what would be most useful to you here? That single shift moves the energy of the interaction from you being obligated to give to you making a conscious choice about how your resources are deployed. But here is what you need to understand before we go to the third type. The entitled receiver and the next person on this list share a common psychological root, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Number 3, the gratitude void. You have met this person. You have bent yourself trying to help them. You have moved things in your life to make space for their needs. And when it was done, when the help was delivered and the situation was resolved, they moved on. Not ungratefully, not rudely, simply, completely, without acknowledgement. As if the help were weather. As if you were a vending machine that dispensed assistance and then went back to waiting. The gratitude void is not the same as the entitled receiver. The entitled receiver feels you owe them. The gratitude void simply does not process the exchange as meaningful. There is a neurological and emotional reality here. Gratitude, real gratitude, requires a person to hold 2 things simultaneously in their mind. First, that they were in a state of need. Second, that another person chose freely to meet that need. That choice recognition is the engine of gratitude. The gratitude void cannot perform that operation consistently. They experience help as ambient, as part of the background, like air. They do not think about where the air comes from. Psychologically, this connects to what Carl Jung called shadow integration. The gratitude void often carries deep discomfort around vulnerability and need. To acknowledge that someone helped them would require acknowledging that they needed help, and that acknowledgement conflicts with the self-image they are working hard to protect. So the help disappears from their conscious accounting. You gave, it vanished, and somehow you are left feeling less than when you started. Machiavelli observed in his discourses on Livy that men forget the injuries done to them by their fathers more readily than they forget the loss of their patrimony. What he is pointing to is a fundamental truth of human psychology. People remember what they lose. They rarely catalogue what they receive. This is not a moral failing, it is a cognitive default. The gratitude void simply lives at the extreme end of that default. Here is your tactical adjustment. Stop performing your help. The louder and more visible your giving, the more it reads as ambient to a gratitude void. Shrink your contributions to precise, targeted, clearly bounded actions. Give once. Give specifically. Give with an explicit outcome you can observe. If that specific contribution goes unacknowledged, you have your data. One incident is not evidence, a pattern is. Give it 3 instances. If 3 clear, specific, bounded contributions produce 0 acknowledgement, that is not a coincidence, that is a character pattern. And you can now make an informed decision about what level of investment this relationship actually warrants. If you are finding this useful right now, do one thing. Hit that like button, not for the algorithm, for your own cognitive reinforcement. The act of identifying what is useful and marking it as such is itself a self-mastery practice. Now stay with me, because the next type is the most psychologically complex one on this list, and it is the one most likely to be someone you genuinely care about. Number 4, the covert contractor. This is where psychology gets truly intricate. The covert contractor is not passive. They are not simply talking without awareness. The covert contractor operates on an elaborate internal ledger. They believe, with deep sincerity, that every favor they do for you creates a debt, and every favor you do for them in their internal accounting does not register as a gift. It registers as their due, as payment on a debt that, in their mind, you already owe them. The covert contract is the core psychological mechanism here. And it is worth slowing down for this, because this concept will change how you read certain relationships for the rest of your life. A covert contract is an unspoken, unilateral agreement. One person decides, internally, that certain behaviors in a relationship come with implicit obligations attached. They help you move apartments. They have now decided, without telling you, that you owe them a category of future assistance at a time and scale of their choosing. You do not know this. You did not agree to this. But the contract lives in their mind. And when you do not deliver on a clause you never knew existed, they experience genuine betrayal. The anger is real. The wound is real. The contract, however, was never real. It was never negotiated. It was never disclosed. We're being held to terms you never accepted. Sun Tzu, whose strategic philosophy parallels and in many ways predates Machiavelli's practical wisdom, wrote in The Art of War, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles." Apply that principle internally. Know yourself. Know why you help. Know what you expect in return. If your helping contains hidden expectations, you are also writing covert contracts. This is not about judging others. This is about examining your own ledger with surgical honesty. Ask yourself this question: when you help someone, are you genuinely giving, or are you making a deposit and expecting interest? Count to 3 before you answer, because the honest answer changes everything about how you understand your own patterns. Here is your tactical adjustment. Radical transparency is your instrument here. Before you commit to helping someone you identify as a potential covert contractor, make the exchange explicit, not hostile, not transactional, simply clear. Say out loud, "I want to help with this, and I want to be clear that I am not expecting anything in return." That sentence, delivered calmly, does 2 things simultaneously. It removes the architecture for a covert contract to form, and it gives you information. Watch how the other person responds to that sentence. Their response will tell you whether they were operating from genuine connection or from ledger logic. The 5th type builds directly on this, because the covert contractor creates an invisible web. But the 5th type builds something more visible, something that looks, at first, remarkably like devotion. Number 5, the dependency builder. This is the most seductive type on this list. The dependency builder does not drain you with crisis. They do not exhaust you with entitlement. They do not vanish after receiving your help. They stay. They call. They check in. They tell you how much you mean to them. They need your input on decisions. They need your presence for their confidence. They need your approval before they move forward. And that need feels good. Be honest. It feels good to be needed. It activates something deep in most humans, particularly those who derive self-worth from being useful and capable. The dependency builder triggers all of that. And so you stay in the cycle. Not because you are weak, because the cycle is feeding something in you that deserves its own examination. Here is the psychological architecture underneath this dynamic. The dependency builder has not yet built the internal infrastructure to navigate their life independently. Whether that is due to early conditioning, environment, or simply a pattern they have never been pushed to break, they have learned to outsource their regulation, their decision-making, their confidence to external figures. And you, in your helpfulness, have become one of those figures. But here is the brutal truth that self-mastery philosophy refuses to soften. By being endlessly available as their external scaffold, you are not helping them build internal strength. You are preventing it. You are the crutch that is stopping them from learning to walk. A wolf does not raise cubs by carrying them indefinitely. At a certain point, the wolf steps back, not from lack of love, From understanding that proximity is now the obstacle. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was himself a former slave and therefore had no romantic illusions about power and dependency, taught that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Applied here, your absence, your strategic withholding of constant availability is itself a form of help. It is the more disciplined, more mature, ultimately more generous form of help. It forces the dependency builder to access resources inside themselves that they do not know they have, because you have always been there before they had to find them. Here is your tactical adjustment. Begin implementing what you can call graduated withdrawal. You are not disappearing. You are not abandoning. You are systematically reducing the frequency and completeness of your availability on a slow, deliberate schedule. Where you once answered immediately, you waited 2 hours. Where you once gave the answer, you give a question back. Where you once solved the problem, you ask them what solutions they have already considered. Each of these micro-adjustments creates a small space, and in that space the dependency builder either grows or reveals that their connection to you was primarily about what you provide rather than who you are. Both outcomes are valuable information. Do not skip the next type, because if you are the kind of person who watches videos like this one, there is a significant probability that you have this person in your life and have been too loyal to name what they actually are. Number 6, the resentful beneficiary. This is the one that lives closest to you. The resentful beneficiary is a person who, after receiving your help, ends up resenting you for it. Read that again. They resented you because you helped them. This sounds paradoxical. It is not. It is one of the most well-documented and consistently observed psychological phenomena in the study of human relationship dynamics. And once you understand the mechanism, it becomes entirely uncomfortably logical. Here is what happens. When a person accepts significant help from another person, it creates what psychology calls a status differential. The helper is positioned in the emotional architecture of the exchange as more capable, more resourced, more stable. The person receiving help is positioned, at least in that moment, as less capable, less resourced, less stable. For most people, this differential is tolerable. Gratitude neutralizes it. The acknowledgement of the gift rebalances the emotional ledger. But for the resentful beneficiary, that status differential does not neutralize. It festers. It activates their shame. Not consciously, not necessarily, but underneath the surface, the fact that they needed you and you had what they lacked becomes an ongoing source of low-grade injury. And over time, that injury transforms. It does not produce gratitude. It produces resentment directed at the very person who gave. This is shadow integration in its most painful form. The resentful beneficiary cannot integrate the shadow experience of having been vulnerable and in need. So they project the discomfort outward. They rewrite the story of your help. In their revised internal narrative, you did not help them from genuine care. You helped them to demonstrate superiority. You helped them to create an obligation. You helped them because you needed them to need you. Their resentment is the mechanism their psyche uses to escape the vulnerability of gratitude. And you, the person who gave, are the one who pays the price. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate necessity that a deceiver will never lack victims for those he wishes to deceive." Now apply that inward. The deception here is not yours. It is the deception the resentful beneficiary's own mind performs on itself. They need a story about your motives that releases them from the discomfort of obligation. And because you cannot control the story someone tells themselves inside their own mind, you are not equipped to defend against this through more giving. More giving makes it worse. It deepens the differential. It multiplies the shame. It accelerates resentment. Here is your tactical adjustment. Observe the post-help dynamic with clinical precision. After you help someone, give it 2 weeks. Watch how they interact with you. Do they move toward you or away from you? Do they reference what you gave with warmth, or do they avoid the subject entirely? Do they find reasons to subtly criticize you or undermine you in social situations? That pattern is data. 3 instances of post-help distancing or undermining is not a coincidence. It is the signature of the resentful beneficiary, and your tactical response is to restructure your help before it triggers the dynamic, not after. Help in smaller increments. Help in ways that center their agency rather than your capability. Help them from beside them, not above them. Equal footing changes the emotional architecture of the exchange and significantly reduces the likelihood of the resentment dynamic forming. Now here is the integration. Here is what all 6 of these types are pointing toward. Here is what Machiavelli was ultimately teaching, what Greene documented, what Epictetus and Sun Tzu and every serious student of power philosophy has converged on for centuries. The quality of your life is not determined by how much you give. It is determined by your discernment in choosing where to give. You are not a vending machine. You are not an emotional utility. You are a finite being with a finite reserve of time, energy, focus, and capability. Those reserves are the raw material of your life. Everything you build, everything you achieve, every relationship you deepen, every version of yourself you grow into requires those resources. And every unit of those resources you pour into a chronic victim, an entitled receiver, a gratitude void, a covert contractor, a dependency builder, or a resentful beneficiary, without clear eyes and clear boundaries, is a unit that is not available for the people and pursuits that actually grow when you invest in them. This is not a call to stop helping. This is a call to help with the same clarity and precision you would apply to any other serious investment of something valuable and irreplaceable. We do not invest money randomly and then wonder why you have none left. Apply the same intelligence to your time and energy. Apply the same discernment to who gets access to you and under what terms, not because people are enemies, not because human nature is irredeemably broken, but because you matter. Your growth matters. The life you are trying to build matters, and building it requires resources. Resources require protection. Protection requires discernment. Machiavelli did not teach ruthlessness. He taught clarity. There is a profound difference between those 2 things. Ruthlessness is the absence of care. Clarity is care applied with discipline. The fox does not stop moving through the world. It moves with awareness, with observation, with the kind of intelligent attention that allows it to navigate complex terrain without being caught in every trap laid for the unwary. You can be warm. You can be generous. You can be someone who genuinely makes other people's lives better. And you can do all of that while maintaining a clear-eyed, self-respectful awareness of who you are helping and what the real dynamic of that help actually is. Here is the consequence of not doing this work. If you finish this video and walk back into your life without applying even one of these tactical adjustments, nothing changes. The chronic victim finds a new crisis next week. The entitled receiver escalates their demands because silence is always interpreted as approval. The gratitude void consumes more and more of your investment and produces nothing back. The covert contractor accumulates more invisible debt on your behalf. The dependency builder remains exactly as dependent as they were this morning. And the resentful beneficiary, the one closest to you, continues to weaponize your generosity against you in ways you have been too loyal and too forgiving to name clearly. Your clarity is the intervention, not for them, for you. If this video gave you something real today, subscribe right now, not as a favor to this channel, as a commitment to yourself that you are going to keep developing the self-mastery framework that protects your energy, sharpens your discernment, and builds the kind of life that does not slowly leak away through unexamined giving. Every video on this channel is built on the same foundation. Practical philosophy, real psychology, clear tactics, no filler. Subscribe and you will not miss what comes next. Share this video with one person in your life who you believe is giving more than they are receiving. You do not need to say anything to them, just send it. Let the content speak. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do for someone you care about is give them the language to name what they have been experiencing, but could not articulate. And now, the final thing I am going to ask you to do. In the comments below, write the word discerning. Not to perform anything for anyone watching, but because the act of writing it is a micro-commitment, a signal to your own nervous system that you have made a decision, that you are choosing, starting now, to bring the same intelligence to your giving that you already apply to every other serious area of your life, that you are not going to keep pouring from a cup you are not refilling, that your energy is not infinitely available to every person who knows how to ask for it. Write discerning below. And then go apply one thing you learned today. Not all 6. 1. Pick the type that resonated most sharply. Pick the tactical adjustment that made you slightly uncomfortable because it requires you to change something you have been doing on autopilot. Apply it this week. 1 week of one adjustment. That is all self-mastery actually is. Not a dramatic transformation, not a single moment of revelation. One better decision, repeated, until it becomes the new default, until discernment is no longer an effort, until it is simply who you are. Machiavelli wrote his most important work while in exile, stripped of his position, separated from power, alone with nothing but his observations and his clarity. He chose, in that condition, to write down what he had learned, rather than let it die with his circumstances. That choice made his thinking available to every person who came after him, including you, watching this, right now. You have the same choice. You can let what you just learned pass through you like noise, or you can let it land. You can let it change one thing, one behavior, one boundary, one decision about who gets the next unit of your irreplaceable time. That single decision, made with clear eyes and self-respect, is where the version of you that you are trying to become actually begins. Write discerning below, and I will see you in the next video.